And
Yeah.
what we find for families who are pursuing adoption is that they have this fortitude that they don't want to give up.
Yeah.
And so I just want to help them. We really strive to inspire that fortitude, to never say no, to constantly giving them choices and options for how they can bring their family together. So just don't give up and don't miss this moment. I said it earlier, don't miss it.
Your dream is to become a mom. My dream is to help you get there. I'm Rebecca Gruenspan, a single mom through domestic adoption and an adoption consultant for over a decade. I'll be your guide, along with other adoption professionals and members of the adoption constellation, walking you step by step down this beautiful and complex path of adopting your baby. When I was going through the adoption process, I had no idea what I was doing, what I needed to know, or more importantly, who to trust. Well, after helping hundreds and hundreds of families grow through the beauty and complexity of adoption, I've learned more than a thing or two, and let me tell you, it's not always rainbows and butterflies. This isn't just another podcast sharing adoption stories, but it's for you if you're genuinely committed to diving in with an open heart, eager to learn everything there is to know about adopting a baby so that you can show up for yourself and your child in the best way possible. This podcast is for you if you're ready to put your newfound knowledge into action. Adoption isn't for the weak of heart, and it certainly isn't done when your baby gets placed in your arms. If that's what you think, I'm afraid you're living in la la land. My promise to you is to keep it real if you promise to keep digging. We'll acknowledge the hard, and we'll also celebrate the joy that is adoption. You ready? Let's do this. Can the dream of adoption become a reality without breaking the bank? Well, that's a fair question, and one that we're going to dive deep into today. Welcome to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. Today, my special guest is Kelly Ellison, whose 25-year journey in the nonprofit world and as a social entrepreneur have made her a beacon of hope for adoptive families. In fact, for the past 10 years, Kelly and her team have assisted over 5,000 prospective families navigate the financial challenges that they experienced along their journey to parenthood. And she is here to share some practical tips and strategies on how you can afford adoption with us today. Kelly is one smart businesswoman and quite the pioneer. She founded both Your Adoption Finance Coach and Seed Coach, which helps hopeful parents finance their fertility journey, and is also the founder and COO of Vesta, a family building employee benefits company. I first met Kelly years ago at an adoption conference and have seen her at many since, always busy working between sessions. Well, no wonder she's building an empire. Beyond her professional achievements, Kelly is a proud mom to her daughter, Maya, who she adopted from China and just graduated high school. She just came back from a dream vacation to Japan, and if you're ever looking for a new recipe, just check out Kelly's Facebook page. Get a notebook ready because you'll need one as Kelly shares some actionable steps to make your adoption journey financially feasible. This episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Kelly, welcome, my friend, to the Adoption Roadmap Podcast. You're welcome. We are going to dig right in, and I want you to start by just sharing your own personal adoption story and how and why you came to adopt.
Thanks, Rebecca. I just got chills listening to my introduction. I'm just all verklempt about that. So
well, we try to build our guests up.
Such a glowing introduction. I appreciate that so much. So yes, all true. Started doing adoption actually through my own personal experience of traveling to China. My husband and I brought our daughter home from China when she was 9 months old. I'll never forget that. It was a life-changing experience. So anyone looking to do an adoption who's really pursuing this path, I'm just really, really, really wanting to let you know that it's possible, wanting to let you know that the path is in front of you. It's exciting. And I think probably my best advice to give you is don't miss a moment, because before you know it, you're going to be waking up at 3 a.m. and not being able to sleep and doing all the things that parents do. But in addition to going to China in 2007 to bring our daughter home when she was 9 months old, prior to that, I was worked in the nonprofit sector. So I was doing fundraising and special events and corporate funding, working with corporations to fund our projects, anywhere from the arts to the environment. And it was always my goal to be an entrepreneur. I've always said to myself, I want to do something for myself at some point. I want to work for myself. I'm sure we've all gone through that process. So I began to think about my journey to adoption, began to think about how difficult it was. And the truth is that in that early stage in 2007, adoption was booming. I don't know if you remember, Rebecca, but there was the adoption from China was booming. For example, there were lots of intercountry adoptions. We at that time had Russia adoptions. We were doing intercountry adoptions with Russia. So it was really kind of a boom, more of a booming. I don't want to say industry, but the truth is it is an industry. So I began to think about why no one was talking about the money. No one. Our agency didn't ask us about the money. No one was talking about the money. And secretly, I'll tell you that I would ask agencies why they were not talking about the money. And many of the agencies with whom I won't say who, but many of the agencies at that time were saying, oh, we don't, why should we worry about that? That's their job. Why should we worry about that? Well, the truth is that the funding is a major pain point. It was then, and it is now. This is a major pain point for prospective adoptive families. It doesn't matter if you have the money or you don't have the money. This is a lot of money. So we began to put together a path and a formula, curriculum, materials. We deliver our services through on-demand video library, but more importantly, our one-on-one coaching. And all of our coaches have had some connection to the adoption process. So it really is a dream for me. My daughter, who was, as I said, 9 months old, growing up now, she could probably do coaching because she's listened to so many
I love it.
coaching calls to listen to her mother talk about this. But I'm going to fix your numbers a little bit, but it's not 5,000, it's 7,000 families.
Oh, okay. I read something old.
Yeah. And so also about $15 million these families have reported raising. Wow. Now that's through grants, fundraising, loans, personal savings, family gifts, those kinds of things. But we do every year take a survey of our families to have them let us know how they're doing in terms of fundraising.
Awesome. Well, before we dive into all of that, so when you adopted Maya, did you set out to adopt in China, or how did you pick China?
So interesting. I did not. Well, no, we did set out to adopt from China. I was finishing my master's program. I was on an international trip with my colleagues in my master's program, executive fellows program. And I was having conversation on a bus one afternoon. I'd just gotten married a little bit later in life, and my husband already had a child from a previous marriage. So we were just kind of not really even knowing if we even really wanted to do that.
Yeah.
So it was in a conversation with a friend that he had said to me, I had asked him about what were the things that he kind of regretted. And he said he regretted he and his wife not pursuing adoption more. They were told by an agency that they were too old to adopt and that they would not qualify for adoption. China, the decision to go to China for me has always been something that has been really on my heart. It was interesting that I didn't realize this, but after arriving home with Maya, I decided to take a home trip and go to my home city, and be with my girlfriends and show off my little baby from China. And it was interesting, Rebecca. I had a friend that reflected to me that in junior high school, I talked about bringing my Asian daughter home in a pink blanket.
Get out.
And I didn't even know that I did that. I mean, I didn't even remember saying that. So, but I've always just been really attracted to the Asian population, and so it was a very clear choice for my husband and I that we were going to go to China.
How long did the process take you?
29 months
Okay,
at
that's
that
a lot.
time, which is short by comparison for now. So the landscape of China has changed dramatically. We were one of the last families to come home with a healthy infant. So China, as you know, has changed their requirements quite a bit over the years.
Okay, I
And
didn't.
so we were one of the last families. We were in a group of other families that went at the same time. Excuse me. And we were one of the last families to come home with a healthy infant. She was 9 months old when we brought her home. So now China adoptions are very far and few between. They're just really kind of opening up after COVID, after all this time. It is really special needs adoptions only.
Okay.
And there are very, very long waits even for special needs adoptions. So very few families are traveling to China. For a healthy infant from China, it's several five plus years for a healthy infant.
Wow. Do you work now in the work that you do? And I want you to describe kind of all three programs.
Yeah.
Do you work with both domestic and international?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
We've always worked with both domestic and international. Over the years, been able to learn more and guide more on the foster and foster to adopt
Okay.
arena. Another aspect of our work is with kinship and relative adoption, which is very, very important. A lot of families get sidelined by a terrible occurrence or disaster or whatever might happen in their family where children are orphaned, and so they need to take on the responsibility of parenting those children. That can be a very very difficult adoption process.
Okay. Can you describe your the three programs that you have?
Oh, sure, sure. So we started out with Your Adoption Finance Coach,
Okay.
just because that was obviously from my personal experience with adoption. Your Adoption Finance Coach and all of our programs actually are based on an personal coaching, an online video curriculum that is independent. Each of the programs have an independent curriculum, templates, a curated network. So when someone goes into Your Adoption Finance Coach, we partner with agencies. So we don't necessarily sell or provide our services to individuals. We provide our services to partnering agencies, and RG Adoption is one of our agencies, our
We
partnering
are.
agencies. So the agency partners with us to bring our service to their families. We do the same thing with Seed Coach, which is for obviously surrogacy and egg donor journeys.
Okay.
And we partner with surrogacy and egg donor clinics to help their intended parents on their financial path. Vesta, which is my newest and kind of proudest development, if you will, is very exciting because throughout this process of working with adoption agencies and surrogacy agencies, one of the things that we found in our inquiry was when we would ask a family, well, how do you expect to pay for this? Do you have savings? Does your employer provide a benefit? We go through this kind of checklist. And that question, does your employer provide a benefit, was always one that would catch people. And they'd be, oh, I don't know. No, I don't think so. No, I don't know where to go. I doubt it very much. So it was becoming very obvious to us that there was this gap around a benefit that an employee would provide or not, and the knowledge and connection that an employee might have toward that benefit. So we decided to create Vesta. One of my favorite stories about this is a family that I coached doing an adoption. He worked for Chase Bank at the time. He was so excited because Chase Bank offered a $20,000 reimbursement for their adoption. They were so excited. So we went through this whole process with them. Lo and behold, they get matched and they have twins. And so they're just, thrilled on the whole idea that they have twins. They can't wait. And so as we're doing their assessment and walking through the process with them, I said, well, have you checked with your employer to see if that is per child? And he was like, oh, that would never be per child. I'm certain that would not be per child. And I said, well, it's usually best practice that it's per child. And sure enough, we encouraged him to check. He went back and checked. And indeed, it was per child. Mm-hmm. So you appreciate this man would have left that on the table, would not have applied for that, would not have even thought that was, and he was over the moon about the idea that he was going to get $20,000 per child.
Wow.
So that's just one
I would
example.
Be too.
Yeah, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
That's just one example of how an employer can really have a high impact on that. So we really feel that Vesta is a program that we provide to employers. And we also encourage our families that if their employer does not provide a family building journey or a family building benefit, we really encourage them to let us help them, petition for that, or let us help them do that. Probably 80% of the benefits that exist right now in the workplace are benefits from individuals who have gone through the process, who have said, knock, 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 HR, we need this. This is hard. This was expensive. A lot of the benefits come from grassroots efforts within the company, where someone in the company or a group of people have had some experience with these benefits or with this experience. Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I want to dive into that a little bit later. So, so you have these 3 programs. The first one you developed was your adoption finance coach. And just to clarify, by the way, RG Adoption Consulting is not an adoption agency, but you work with adoption entities that work with families. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then you have your other program, which helps with families that are going through surrogacy and fertility, their fertility journey the same way, right? You help them get grants and loans and fundraising or whatever they need to do to help get money and also to go to their employer. And then you have Vesta, that is, you work with employers to try to promote employee benefits for family building, right?
That's right.
Okay, that's awesome. So here you are, you adopted. What motivated you to actually start a business to help people with money? Was that something that you struggled with and just saw a need and weren't happy doing what you were doing? Like, what made you decide, oh, this could be a business?
Well, I think that certainly it was from a personal experience. Certainly it was really understanding that most people have this pain point, that most people, but I will tell you that I was involved in a program called Spark Labs in Kansas City, which is where I live. That was a entrepreneurial incubator early on in the process of creating this company. The truth is that everybody has a great idea, right? Everybody has a great idea for a business or for a company. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My father always talks about me trying to sell my bike in the front yard, and he came out and he was going to help me, and I had this price of like, I don't know, $15 on my bike, and my father said, "You're never going to get $15 for that bike, it's and you're never going to get that." And he walks away, and sure enough, at dinner that night, I show him my $15 that I got. Hot damn. So I've always been a serial entrepreneur, social serial entrepreneur. So what does that mean? That means I can't stop thinking about new ideas, how to improve things. But
you and me both. My staff hates me.
Yeah, exactly. We're just one of those kind of people.
Yes.
But the social part of it is really important, I think, because it's not just about making money. It is about making a change. It's about solving a pain point. it's not enough just to have a good idea. You have to really understand how to solve a problem, and effectively solve a problem that is going to help people move along that process of whatever your industry is. So a lot of learning, of course, has taken place. I can't think of anything better to do. I get to get up every morning and do this. I do, and we all have our good days and our bad days, but
Yeah,
I get to get up and do this, and I know that you understand that, Rebecca, when
sure.
I say that to you.
Absolutely. And okay, so you start this business. What were some of your biggest challenges you faced when launching your adoption finance coach, and how did you
Um,
overcome them?
I think it's easy to say hindsight in retrospect. Part of the challenge of being an entrepreneur is replicating yourself, and so
That's
it's an
such a good one.
yeah, that's a big one.
That's a good one.
Isolation is a real problem for entrepreneurs. Because we are, and I'm saying we because I know you're part of this, but we are creative thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
We think out of the box. We do a lot of things very differently. We're not. I don't know that I would, characterize myself as too much of a detailed person. My team would probably say that too. The devil is in the details.
Mm-hmm.
So I think isolation was probably, I didn't get that until later on, that I needed a team around me. I needed to learn how to replicate myself so that when I go away, when I ride off into the sunset, and I will, Rebecca, ride off into the sunset.
Take me with you.
Okay. I want to leave a legacy behind. I want to be able to, that this isn't going to go away when I go.
Yeah.
That I have a team of people that are committed, and that's really still what we're building. I don't know that we're there yet, but that's really still what we're building every day, is leaving that legacy of this work so that it can continue without me. And that's the biggest challenge.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of my challenges too, is how can I keep this going? And
Yes.
part of that is coming up with new ideas every day. And we
Yes.
are entrepreneurs through and through, except that I get too much into the details too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's difficult. It can be
so
very difficult.
yeah, for families that are just thinking about adoption, what are the first steps they should take to financially prepare for the journey? Are there specific actions that they can implement immediately? Where do you
Yeah.
think they should start?
I think they should set up a separate account for their adoption. So
Okay.
we hear a lot of people that say, "Oh yeah, I have $10,000 for my adoption," or "Yeah, oh yeah, I have $20,000, whatever it is, $1,000 for 5,000, whatever the number is." Commingling. I think it's a mistake to commingle your funds with your emergency savings, for example, or other savings that you might have, because life happens, doesn't it?
It does.
So, you might have money in an account that you're saying, "Oh, that's for the adoption," but then something happens with the plumbing or something happens with whatever. So, when we start working with a family, the first question that we have for them is, "How much money are you setting aside for your adoption?" You really need to do an evaluation of your own personal budget and make a commitment. And I do mean a commitment. And to set aside and really go to the bank, create an adoption savings account. Name it whatever you want to name it, but put $100 in there every single day. I think a minimum start, you probably have a better idea of this than I do, but a minimum start is going to be $2,500 to $5,000. I think the key is that you want to be able to pay an application fee, or you want to be able to pay an initial amount of money for an application fee or an agency fee. You want to be able to pay for your home study. Getting that home study done quickly is really kind of that first phase of moving to the next stage. And why is that important? It's important because you cannot apply for grants until that home study is done. So signing up with an agency or a consultant like yourself, getting established, getting that home study done is really kind of the first thing that you need to be doing.
Okay. Now I want to stop and unpack some of that, because
Yeah.
there's a lot within that.
Right.
2,500 is not going to get you a consultant or your home
No,
study.
right.
maybe your home study in some places.
Maybe, right.
So, I want to go back to that. And I always tell people if they don't have at least 30
Okay.
where they know it, where it's coming from, because you're still going to need more. And as I'm talking to you in August of 2024, private infant adoptions can range anywhere from 40 to 80. It's crazy.
Now they are going up, right?
I mean,
right.
10 years ago they were 30, and now we're
Right,
talking
right.
about an 8. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So your business must be booming, but so I think you need a big seed there, but that's a little, we can break that down a little bit because I know you have a whole theory of where the money should come from and how to break that out. Home studies. I want to just put this out there and make it clear for people that while the home study is the first initial legal step in the process for you to be able to adopt, I would never suggest to somebody to just go out and get your home study and then figure out the rest.
No, I would not either.
And the reason is your home study, once it's done, it's a time bomb. It's
Yeah,
like
it is.
it's a ticking time bomb where it will expire in usually a year, depending on your state, but usually a year. And so every day that you're not trying to match, meaning that you're not active with an agency who might be presenting you situations, is money down the drain. And by the way, when you renew your home study, it also costs money. Not
Right.
as much, but it's going to cost you like $500 to $700 each time you have to renew.
Right,
so you might as well make that work for you. And so you need to have everything, at least know the route that you're taking first before you start your home study. And the way we do it at RG Adoption Consulting is that while they are working on their home study, after they get to a certain point, we're also working on their profile, because you need those two things in order to apply for an agency. So you're saying you at least need a home study to even be considered for a grant.
Right.
And you need a home study and a profile to be active with an agency.
That's right. That's right.
That's a whole lot.
Yeah, and let me qualify. So to say, depending upon who you're working with. So if you're working with an agency, there's an agency application fee. If you're working with RG, then that process starts. And so for your clients, for example, Rebecca, we would start working with your clients immediately.
Yeah.
Whether they have a home study or not, we're working with them immediately the moment that they come into our program. Part of the challenge with adoption is that it's so highly customized based on the individual, based on what they have, what they don't have, and what they need, based on their journey. So, and kind of the choices that they've made throughout the process. So, we really start from kind of ground zero. But when you ask me, like, what's the first thing they should do, it would be to set up that adoption savings account. And then if we need to look at, okay, you need to have X amount of dollars, then you're right. They might be applying for grants. They might want to do grants, but the truth is that by the time they're out there profiling and networking for a birth mom, they need to be able to have the resources and answer the question. If they got selected by a birth mom and a situation came to them that they wanted to say yes to, they need to be able to say yes to that situation without wringing their hands saying, oh my gosh, I really want this, but I don't have the money, and where's it going to come from? We want you to come to that place and be able to know, okay, I can borrow from my 401k. Okay, we have a HELOC loan. Okay, I have an adoption line of credit set up. I have a family member who's going to give me a gift. So whatever that is, our job is not just grants and not just fundraising. Our job is to help them to create a comprehensive financial plan for the entire journey. And that is so customized because everyone's finances look different.
So when someone first comes to you, what do? Do you ask them to lay out tell you what their financial
yes
life looks like at the moment?
Yes, we do. And that's pretty important because we want to know where their starting point is. And To be honest, some families come and they haven't even started this. Some families come and they have already money set aside. Some families come with knowing what their employer benefit is. So there's an inquiry. So when someone comes into our program, they receive an intake form. It's just questions about where they are, what kind of adoption that they're doing, what their timeline is, kind of where are they in the process. We can meet a family wherever they are in the process and start from there. Ideally, we want to have a family come at the beginning of the process,
Yeah.
so that they can, so that they can be a part of that, and we can be a part of kind of guiding them through that process. So it's an intake form. Then they have at least a 1 hour first call with the coach, and that coach is going to really drill down on that to find out not only how much you have in your savings account, but how much are you setting aside? So if you have $10,000 in your savings account, okay, that's great. But how much of that is for the adoption? Don't we understand what an emergency savings account is now more than we ever have? COVID gave us that lens, didn't it? It said, you better have something set aside for an emergency.
Okay,
So
let me ask you a
always-
question, though.
Pardon me?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
For people who don't have a lot of money and are scraping,
Yeah.
do they still have an emergency fund? Because I know I took every penny I had. There was no emergency fund.
Well, they might not have an emergency fund, but they would have resources. So they might have, a family member that's kind of their backup. They might have a 401k that they can, draw from.
Okay.
It's more about really understanding what their resources are. So if we're working with someone who doesn't necessarily have a savings account and doesn't necessarily have money set aside for this, then the question is, how much money can you set aside? What are your resources? Do you have a family member you could ask? Are you interested in fundraising? Do you qualify for grants? Does your company provide? So it's really kind of a checklist, going through the checklist and identifying yes, no, and then making a plan, helping them to make a plan. It's helping them to own that plan too. This is not just about us telling them what to do. They have to own that plan. They have to work that plan. We also tell families, don't just do this and then, never look at it again. You're going to go to that projected budget and you're going to look at that and you're going to make decisions on that on sometimes a weekly basis, sometimes a, twice a month basis, whatever the case might be, how quickly things are moving. Things are going to evolve throughout your adoption process, and they're going to change. At the very beginning, you are going to put projected costs in there. You're going to think about what projected costs are. You're going to set a budget for birth mom expenses. You're going to kind of go through that, but then those things are going to change. So it's really an ongoing process to help that budget evolve. It also happens not only on the expense side, but it happens on the revenue side. So if we have someone who doesn't start with much and they've got, we don't know where to go for this, then there's the conversation. What's your credit score? Can you get a loan? Do you have a family member? Are you open to fundraising? So there's a lot of different paths that kind of break off from that initial conversation, again, based on the individual. That's been a challenge because not everybody looks the same.
For sure.
Yeah.
I want to ask this next question, and I think I know some of it, but many families face financial misconceptions about adoption. Can you share any common myths and practical steps to overcome them using your programs?
Probably the first myth is I'm going to get grants to pay for all my adoption. That's probably the first and biggest myth.
Okay. Yeah.
No, you're not. Sorry. You're not going to get grants to pay for all of your adoption. A foundation does not want to pay for all of your adoption. Kind of our formula is a third, a third, and a third. So a third of it is your own money. A third of it is going to be loans and family gifts. And a third of it is going to be grants and fundraising. And it's very often we'll have people that will say to us, I'm not taking a loan out for my adoption, dig their heels in. I'm not doing that. I don't want to borrow money. Okay. That's perfectly fine. So then you need to adjust your formula. So then you need to do more fundraising. Another
What
myth,
was the second third again? There was family and what?
so it's a third of it's your own money. That's
Yeah.
part of the contribution. A third of it is going to be loans and family gifts.
Loans and family gifts. So a
Yeah,
loan is different than a grant. So a
right.
loan would be from a bank,
A bank,
credit
family
card.
member, credit line,
Okay.
credit card.
Hmm.
We, 401k, 403b. That's a
Okay.
loan. Okay.
Okay.
And then the last quadrant is going to be fundraising and grants.
Okay.
Now, you might be asking, why aren't employer benefits included in that? Why
Ah,
isn't the adoption tax credit included in that? Well, here's why. They're not a part of that initial funding. That's after the fact.
yes.
That is going to be upon finalization. So you don't want to count money that you don't have yet. But a good rule of thumb is for those people that are like, I'm not borrowing any money for my adoption. Well, okay, that's fine. It's not our job to tell you how, it's our job to educate you.
Before we go on, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go away. We still have so much to talk about. Hey there, Adoption Roadmap fam. Are you ready to take the next step on your journey to parenthood? If so, head over to our website and take our quiz. It's called, Are You Ready to Adopt? It's not just about testing your knowledge. It's about making sure you're emotionally and practically prepared for the beautiful, complex journey of adoption. Let's make your dream of parenthood a reality. Go to rgadoptionconsulting.com and take the Are You Ready to Adopt quiz today. That's rgadoptionconsulting.com. The quiz is free, and it will let you know where you are in the process and if you're ready to jump into your adoption journey. All right. So, going back to some common myths
Yeah.
and misconceptions, or
Sure.
we mentioned you can't fund your whole adoption with grants.
Right.
What else do you got up your sleeve?
The adoption tax credit, I think, is sometimes is a pretty big myth. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The first myth is that people believe that it's a refund,
Mm-hmm.
and a refund and a tax credit are two totally different experiences. A refund is totally different than a tax credit. A tax credit is your tax liability. So, how do I explain that? The best way to explain that is that if you go and look at your W-2 from your job, you'll see that they have withheld a certain amount of taxes.
Mm-hmm.
That's your tax liability. So let's say that you paid $7,000 in taxes at the end of the year, and that's what your W-2 reflects. When you complete your adoption journey and you have finalization, this is not placement, it's finalization. In the year that you finalize that adoption, you apply for the adoption tax credit. You, in effect, get that $7,000 back.
Right.
Okay. And then what happens is let's say the adoption tax credit is $14,000. It's a lot more, but let's just say for sake of numbers, it's $14,000. So then what will happen is $7,000 of that will carry over to the next year, and you'll get another $7,000 back. So a big misconception for folks is that, oh, I'm going to get all this back through the adoption tax credit. And that's a repeated kind of myth through adoption agencies and social workers that do their best that don't really understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we find that CPAs will do is they will tell a family they make too much money for the adoption tax credit. And while there are phase out ranges for the adoption tax credit, it starts really high. I mean, it's like $257,000 up to, $289,000. And that is a modified adjusted gross income. So that's not your gross income. That is your modified adjusted gross income. So that's after expenses. So, many people qualify for the adoption tax credit. And because at the beginning, perhaps their tax accountant who has little experience with the adoption tax credit will just kind of, dismiss it. Oh, you don't qualify for that. So don't worry about that. We're not going to do that.
Oh.
Many accountants do not have experience with the adoption tax credit. And so they will dismiss the credit, not understanding the law. And unfortunately, families leave money on the table.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's very cool. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never looked at it that way. You explained it
Yeah.
very well.
Yeah. A good best practice, Rebecca, at the beginning is to, first of all, talk to us.
Mhm.
We can give you some baseline information. That's a plug for me. But also, the other thing is to find a tax accountant, ask your tax accountant or your tax professional if they have experience with the adoption tax credit. I liken this to hip replacement or knee replacement surgery.
Mhm.
So when you go in to do that, you're saying, how many knee replacements do you do, doctor? Well, are you going to pick the doctor that did 2 or are you going to pick the doctor that did 200, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, and
So
we
look,
recently had
yeah,
a financial planner um, on an episode I can link in the show notes who often will partner and bring in an adoption tax credit expert to help
yes,
with that when it comes to your
right,
taxes
right.
and you have to meet with an accountant. So,
Yes, that's right.
um, any other myths that you are thinking of?
Um, it's probably not a myth as much as it is just a misunderstanding.
Uh huh.
Um, do not wait for placement to go for grants. I don't know how folks
Mm-hmm.
get this impression. I don't know where they read this, but by the time you get a placement for a child, by the time your child is placed in your home,
Mm-hmm.
you have just now eliminated probably 80% of the grants that are available out there. So many foundations will not provide grants after placement. So you need to get busy on that process. By the time that home study is done, if you're working with us, we're working with you prior to that home study being done to help you with your personal story, to help you articulate your budget, to help you get all of those, what we would consider to be core documents available. And then by the time the home study is done, your coach is saying, okay, we're recommending these, or there's another one too. We're recommending these foundations that you want to apply to. So that takes me to another myth. Do not apply to all foundations.
Mm-hmm.
You're wasting your time and you're wasting their time. So to go out and just apply to everybody that you see is not a good use of your time. Just don't do it.
So, how do you
Work.
find the right
Yeah.
ones for you if they don't get to work with you?
Yeah. So, go to the website, read the mission, read the FAQ page, read their guidelines, find the families that they've been doing. Don't ignore that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if this is a highly Christian organization that you are looking at for a foundation as a foundation, and they want something in their guidelines that you cannot do, don't ignore that, because by ignoring that, they mean it. When they say they want those guidelines, when they say they want those requirements, they mean it. They're not joking. And don't send them more than what they want. Don't send pictures. They don't want pictures. They don't want any superfluous information. They just want what they want. And then once you establish that relationship and you establish, you get selected and you get to the next round, then perhaps you can share a little bit more. But it seems like a lot of folks will do a lot of really difficult work on the front end, which
Uh-huh.
ends up, then that leads to frustration. It's like, well,
Yeah.
why aren't these people contacting me? Well, what happened to my grant application? Don't call them. They don't want you to call them. Recently, I had a conversation with a family that was disheartened because they weren't getting grants, and they had applied for several. And sometimes it takes more than once. Sometimes it takes, you have to reapply. So sometimes it takes more than once to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Many people don't understand that in these grant deadlines, in these, some of them will have 2 or 3 deadlines a year. We're talking about thousands of applications.
Yeah.
Thousands of applications. This is a very competitive space. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I know two other kind of misconceptions that come to my mind, and I know I've
Yeah.
asked you one of these before. Number one is um, very wealthy people believe that they will get chosen faster because they are wealthy. That is
Really.
a myth. That is
That
a
is so
myth.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And that wouldn't necessarily fall within you
Right.
wouldn't
Right.
see that as much, but I have heard that from time to time. Well, you know, they think that because they have a bigger house or, whatever, that they're in,
More appealing. More
yeah,
appealing.
or this
Yeah.
sense of entitlement, right?
Right. 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 Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's one. That's
Mhm.
not the case. It's really what the expectant mom connects with. And so if
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
leading with your money and showing them all the things you have, and this, sometimes it's hard to relate.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
but number two is, and this I have often asked you, is why would somebody who is wealthy need to talk to you or feel like they even should spend their time talking to you? Because they don't need money.
They don't need money, but they're wealthy for a reason. They've gotten to the point that they are for a reason. $40,000, $50,000, $80,000 means the same to them as it does to you and I. Money is money. It's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what we find is that families that are of wealth are more interested in the budgeting process. They may have the money, but they're more interested in the budgeting process.
Mm.
Remember that a phase out range. So that phase out range goes up every year. For a family that might be making $275,000 a year or $300,000 a year, they're not going to qualify for grants. But after consideration, after working with a coach, we might be able to check: are you doing all of your pre-taxed contributions, for example? Are you taking advantage of that? So, in other words, at the beginning of the process, how can you get that modified adjusted gross income down below the certain number so that you can get the adoption tax credit, or you can get a partial adoption tax credit? That's very important to somebody who might have the money already to be able to get that money back. So sometimes I find that folks that have more capacity and more resources financially are even more interested in our services, because we're able to really identify or help them to identify how much money do they need, when do they need that money, and kind of what that process or timeline looks like. We have a very comprehensive budgeting tools. And
Mm-hmm.
in those budgeting tools include not only a projected budget, but then what you're going to do is you're going to go move over to a timeline that's integrated with that budget. And it's going to give you all of your expenses, and you're going to plot on that timeline when those expenses are due. You're also going to plot on that timeline how much money you have during that time. So you're going to come up with a gap number or not every single month. And that's going to tell you what you need.
Hmm.
For folks that have the money, they are equally interested in where their money is going and when is it going.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to move now to you mentioned something early on about
Yeah.
helping families go to their employer to try to get them to give benefits, in this case adoption benefits, if they don't already have them, or family planning benefits.
Right.
How do you do that, or how would you what advice would you give to a family who needs to go do that on their own?
Well, the first part of the question of how do we do that, we have a pretty extensive lead gen sales marketing team that goes out and actually, calls on various different HR directors. So we have a machine that's already in place where we do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Dave Thomas Foundation offers a very comprehensive list of the top adoption friendly benefits
Yes.
for corporations. So if you don't know if your company provides that, that's a good place to start. We also keep a database of the benefits that companies have. So we also have a database for you that we can certainly share for you. If your company does not have a benefit, then the first thing is to call the HR department and ask them if they have a family building benefit, or ask them if they have an adoption benefit, because the benefits sometimes are coupled together. So when I talk about family building benefits, I'm talking about adoption, surrogacy, egg donor, egg preservation.
Mm-hmm.
It can get very, very extensive. Um, recognize that HR professionals are not necessarily in the know about all these different little aspects that we've talked about. So there's kind of sometimes some different ways to ask. Do they have a family building benefit? Do they have an adoption benefit? If they do have an adoption benefit, then they should have a policy that you can get a copy of. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you can, I would recommend getting that copy and that policy and then being able to read that. Some employers will give time off. Some employers will give a reimbursement. Some
Mm-hmm.
employers will give both.
Mm-hmm.
Just before this podcast, I just got off the phone with a prospective employer. Listen to this. They are going to give $16,810, which is equivalent to the adoption tax credit currently, in a reimbursement. Then they are going to allow an employee to offset from taxes $16,810, which is considered an adoption assistance program. Then they are going to give the employee time off. Okay. And then those employees are going to be able to go for the adoption tax credit. So this is a pretty small company. They're 1,200 employees.
What?
Yes, that is huge. That's huge. I mean,
Oh
that
my
potentially
gosh.
could make you whole by the end of your adoption, by the finalization of your adoption.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you are somebody who is looking for a job and you think, and you haven't built your family yet, and you think that's something that you might
Yeah.
want to do,
Yeah.
not even knowing if you're fertile, infertile, want to adopt, not,
Right.
but you
Whatever,
just know
whatever.
you want to build your family,
Yeah.
go look at the Dave Thomas
Go look at the Dave Thomas Foundation.
list.
No. It is impressive. It's impressive. Here's
And it's
another
big.
statistic for you.
It's
Yeah.
growing day by
It's
day
growing.
because of
Yeah.
Vesta.
Yeah. Here's another statistic for you. 70% of women will seek a job elsewhere for lack of fertility or family building benefits from their company.
Oh, I believe it.
70%.
Wow.
Okay. We also know that our workforce is changing, isn't it? So our workforce, our definition of family is very different. It's no longer a man and a woman, it's no longer that traditional family.
Mm-hmm.
It's same-sex families, it's single families, it's transgender families, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's all of those families. So corporations are, what we see a lot with corporations in the Vesta program is that they want to fulfill the DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion. They want to fulfill that requirement. There is a program called the Human Rights Campaign that actually has 5 triggers, 5 components to being able to be listed on the Human Rights Campaign. And so one of those is diversity, inclusion, and equity. So having a company actually prove that. So companies are really on the block for, you need to create these benefits, because let's be honest, they might not necessarily use those benefits. The utilization of these benefits is very low.
Mm-hmm.
0.5%, 1% of the employees might actually end up doing an adoption. Okay. But the truth is that when you're recruiting from an HR perspective, when you're recruiting and retaining employees, and the loyalty that these kinds of benefits will bring, it's high retention, it's high recruitment. It's something that it's a flag that employers want to fly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it doesn't dawn on you until you're there and you need it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I mean, and that's already answering some of this next question, how the landscape of adoption and fertility support is evolving and where you see it going. But you're really creating a lot of the change yourself. But where else do you see adoption and fertility support going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh gosh, I wish I had a crystal ball.
I'll lend you mine.
Yeah. I don't have a crystal ball about this. I think that one area that has been of interest to, that we hear kind of a little bit of interest to employers, is embryo adoption. We've been hearing that kind of conversation about embryo adoption, egg donor, egg preservation. We've been hearing a lot of that. Um, in terms of surrogacy, kind of what they're going to pay for. We actually help corporations to write the policy. So, as an example, in adoption, typically birth mom expenses are not going to be considered qualified adoption expenses. They're not going to get those back. We had a discussion just before this presentation, or this podcast today, during my presentation, of was the company going to offer step parent adoption or not, as a part of their reimbursement. So what we see is that I really feel like down the road, we're going to see a lot more flexible benefits around adoption, around surrogacy, around, the whole kind of really looking at the whole family journey. What we're also seeing in benefits overall is that corporations don't want to go here for one benefit and here for another benefit and here for another benefit. They want a full turnkey benefit. So Vesta partners with a company called Fertility that is a fertility specialist. They're an aggregator. So they provide the fertility benefits for Disney and PwC and JP Morgan Chase and a lot of large companies. And when that company says we want to add adoption and surrogacy, that's when they bring Vesta in. So we are seeing that a lot of major fertility companies are expanding their offering to include some of these non-traditional benefits, that because it doesn't always look the same. Just because, and you made this point a moment ago, not everyone, because they have infertility issues, is going to adoption.
Right.
It's across the board. I mean, same-sex families, single families, it's an option that's available to many people, not just because of fertility.
For sure. Before is there anything else any tips or anything you want to leave families with that we haven't covered yet?
Well, I think the word fortitude comes to mind. Okay. You know this probably as well as I do. Whenever I talk with any family that is doing an adoption, I would say to you that one primary characteristic is fortitude. Never giving up. Just never giving up, because you can't. Yeah. And that vision, that picture of, bringing your family together forever, it's just on you. It's stuck on you. You want that to happen. And what we find for families who are pursuing adoption is that they have this fortitude, that they don't want to give up. Yeah. And so I just want to help them. We really strive to inspire that fortitude, to never say no, to constantly giving them choices and options for how they can bring their family together. So just don't give up, and don't miss this moment. I said it earlier. Don't miss it. Before you know it. I remember bringing our daughter home, and I remember 3 a.m. in the morning, walking her and pacing in my living room, so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I was a danger to myself and others, right? And here I had waited beyond the gestation of an elephant. I had waited that long.
Well, I've never heard it quite that way before.
Yeah, the gestation, I looked it up. The gestation of an elephant is 29 months. It's a lot beyond the gestation of an elephant. And here I had traveled thousands of miles and spent thousands of dollars. But no one prepared me for the fact that I was going to be walking blind in my living room at 3 a.m, pacing back and forth with her in a very certain way on my shoulder so that she would fall asleep, right? So don't miss this moment. Go take a nap. Go take a nap.
That's a great piece of advice. You
Yeah.
have given us a lot of golden nuggets, I like to say.
Oh, good, good.
And before we wrap up, I have a couple quick fire questions.
Okay, I'm ready.
To keep you on your toes. And the first one is really a shout out. Who is a person or an organization who has impacted your life as it relates to adoption?
Oh my gosh. Person or organization. Wow, that puts me on the spot, doesn't it? I'm gonna say that it was the inspiration, I think, of the Dave Thomas Foundation. Like you, in the very beginning, I had a radio show called Your Adoption Coach many years ago that kind of started my career. And it was that experience of interviewing people in the adoption space. And I'll never forget having Rita Sorinen on my show and how inspiring she was to talk about what the Dave Thomas Foundation has done. And that had informed me throughout my career around what prospective adoptive families experience, but also how you can bring kind of the whole picture together. So I would say probably that interview was, many wonderful people interviewing, but probably that interview that helped to inform me.
Love it. And you're not the first person to bring up the Dave Thomas Foundation.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, which I love. All right. I mentioned in your interview that your Facebook page is just filled with recipes. So what's your favorite dish to cook?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that. Okay, here's the truth. I don't cook those dishes. I do not. I don't even know when. I mean, maybe one or two I've cooked. But here's why I do that. Because I'm so... whenever I scan my Facebook page and I see a recipe that I like and I go, oh yeah, I'm going to make that. And so then I share it so that I can then go back and look at my page and see what recipes, but rarely do I actually make them. I will tell you that. And I've thought about you since you brought that up.
That's so funny.
And so one day I'm going to make a recipe and I'm going to share it on Facebook, and I'm going to tag you, Rebecca. And
okay,
say,
good.
Rebecca, I made this, and I recommend it.
So that answer is yet to come. TBD.
Yet to come. To be determined. I will do my best to go back and make as many as I possibly can, just for you.
I love it. When you were a child, what did you dream you'd be when you grew up?
Okay, so boy, you get really personal, don't you? So when I was a child, I thought that I was going to be a professional figure skater.
Yes. Love that.
And went, actually, I took professional figure skating lessons from the time I was 7 years old. I competed at the high school level. When I was in middle school and high school, I competed. I abruptly left figure skating when I was 17, right before I graduated from high school. I walked away from it, wanting to have the normal high school life, to which I, was kind of late to the party, but I ended up doing that. But then it came back to really bless me because I ended up teaching figure skating for about 15 years at a local country club here in Kansas City, which introduced me to a number of philanthropists in the city. And I'll never, all those connections to all those people, Shirley Hellsberg of Hellsberg Diamonds, all these wonderful people. And that's what catapulted me into the nonprofit sector, and the rest of the story is known. So
I love it.
Figure skating. So I love to watch the Olympics, the Winter Olympics especially.
Yeah, I was thinking the Winter Olympics are probably your thing, and right now we're in the Summer Olympics of 2024. Since we both have teenagers, what is the cringiest thing you did as a teenager?
Oh my God, I can't answer that question. It would be providing too much. Oversharing.
I wanted to
see. I refuse to answer on the grounds that it could incriminate me.
Okay.
I grew up in the 70s, Rebecca, so that's all
Me
I'm
too.
going to tell you.
Me too.
No way.
Okay, then we'll end on an easier one.
Okay.
Describe adoption in 3 words.
Wow. Describe adoption. I don't need 3 words. I just need one: love.
Thank
I
you
just need
so
one.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Remember, success is a continuous journey. If you find yourself veering off course, just steer back onto the roadmap until you reach your destination. And whatever you do, like Kelly said, never lose hope. Hope is that light inside you that will lead you to your dreams. I hope you liked today's episode. Thank you, Kelly Ellison, for everything that you
Rebecca.
shared with us.
Love working with you. Love working with your families.
Oh, we love working with you too.
Yes.
If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe so you never miss one. And if you wouldn't mind, give us a review on Apple Podcasts so that more people can hear this too. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. If you did, I have a few favors to ask of you. First, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, I'd love to hear your takeaways. Please write a review and let me know what you liked. And if you have a question or a suggestion on what you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear that too. Please shoot me an email at support@rgadoptionconsulting.com and let me know what you'd like to hear about. And if you have a question, I may just answer it online. Thanks again for listening. Tune in every Wednesday and Friday morning for a brand new episode of the Adoption Roadmap podcast. Until next time, bye-bye.